You guys don't have to sit that far back there if you guys want to move up. There's plenty of seats in the front.
All right, let's get this party started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the May 11th Tech Levy update. Tashawn, you want to kick us off? Whoa. There you
Certainly. Just want to make sure this thing works. So, good evening, board directors, Superintendent Enfield. I am grateful to be here to share some of the work that has been going on with the technology levy. So this presentation also served as an opportunity for me to ground myself in our levy work and begin to see what I'm taking partial ownership in partnership with the other teams that are involved. So I will get started. So this promise is one of the main reasons that I returned to Highline, because I really love how it is aligned with every single action in the district. And this levy is no exception. So as part of this conversation, you're going to hear me refer a lot to the promise and the promise that we make to students when we pass things that are community-based technology levies and such. So a real quick review of our agenda. So I'm going to walk through technology, again, from my perspective, because I'm using this as an opportunity to introduce myself and, again, some of my philosophy around technology and how this levy can be used in order to support some of those ideas that were generated based on conversations that I've had internally over time. I will talk through technically speaking, or practically speaking, excuse me, the levies in general. Fiscal and budgets, we'll talk a little bit about the numbers, also about some of the projects that are ongoing, as well as potential next steps and considerations. So technology is a tool. You'll often hear this described whenever you hear people mention technology. Oftentimes that has a lot to do with the fact that people have a funny relationship with technology. Some people are infinitely afraid of it. Other people are willing to tinker and make as many mistakes as possible in order to learn. But it is a technology. It is a tool, excuse me. But it's a tool similar to where a hammer or saw or a tool, they're used to build bigger and better things. And so I want to explain some of my personal philosophy around technology and how it fits into this space. So technology is a tool that bridges gaps. So every student has a base amount of potential, opportunity, and also opportunities to engage in the work. There were terms thrown around in the early days of technology, especially in K-12, that really spoke to technology rich versus technology poor. What the levy allows you to do is use technology as a as a tool to bridge gaps so that every student starts at least the same level in terms of what they have. Now, we can augment that based on initiatives and other things, but at the very least, that gap is one of the gaps that can be bridged. Technology is a tool that enables digital equity. So when we think about equity, there is an evolution of what digital equity is in this space. Digital equity started out as, it was called the homework gap. We want to be able to close that homework opportunity gap. So it started off being all about cables, wires, and boxes. As that's evolved, it's turned into more about access. How do students access materials? How do they access resources? How do they get the things that they need to in order to move things forward? Additionally, the definition of digital equity, according to the Digital Equity Act of 2021, is the conditions in which individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed to participate in American society fully and the economy. So once you expand the expectation as well as the definition of digital equity, it starts to paint a picture of what's possible, but also how far we need to go in terms of how we can push technology and technology initiatives. And technology is a tool that enhances instruction. One of the things that we often think about is how do we integrate technology? For every technology initiative, there should be robust professional learning, professional development, as well as technical training to allow teachers to be able to engage in how do they incorporate this into their instructional practice. This technology gives a lot of space to be able to accomplish that. But closing the digital equity gap is not just about devices and connectivity, as much about learning as it is about the technology itself. So if we can provide opportunities to enhance instruction using technology, it gives us a lot more space to be able to, again, close those gaps, create this digital equity space. So levies. levies are about students. We want to give students access. Remember when I just spoke about access being one of the end products of a levy, also in of technology. When students have access, they're able to create. When students are able to create, they're able to engage. When students are engaged, they're able to achieve positive outcomes. Engagement. This is something that was talked a lot about during the pandemic. How do you create engagement? Even how do you define engagement? I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for students to be able to engage as long as we can find what that access piece is, as well as determine what is the thing that charges them to be able to engage. Technology allows us to expand and personalize that so that we can make sure that we reach every single student back to the promise. And then options. If we're talking about differentiation, personalization, or anything that has to do with how do we connect with students, having as many options as possible allows us to be able to reach, again, every single student. With technology, it's scalable, meaning that we get an opportunity with using the same device to reach multiple students in multiple different ways. So for teachers, again, when I mentioned learning before, back to a quote, or at least a statement that I've heard said as part of a couple of groups that I'm a part of, one of them being the Digital Equity Advisory Committee for COSIN. We've been really tossing around this idea of closing the digital equity gap isn't, again, just about devices and connectivity. We have to push past the fact that just because you have a one-to-one program or one-to-one devices does not mean you've closed the digital equity gap. All it means is that you've given access. So once we create that access, then there's other pieces in terms of how do we create equity across schools? We need to be able to use the technology effectively in the classroom in order to support all the work that happens. And so part of what I see as one of the key relationships in this space is to be able to work with our teaching and learning teams and instructional technology teams, as well as school leadership teams, to be able to figure out better ways to use technology in the classroom to be able to support teachers in their professional learning, as well as their goals and objectives for helping students succeed. Support. We want to be able to provide the best possible support to reduce lost instructional time. So if we can really support with the best possible technology, we can reduce lost instructional time by having devices that just don't break, or having devices that allow the greatest access and use, ease of use, so that support becomes easier. And collaboration. Collaboration tools and platforms that are used in this space allow teachers to be able to use best practices and share best practices easily. If that isn't part of the culture pushed by the technology, then we don't necessarily have the opportunities to be able to share whatever the best practice and best needs are. And then from a community perspective, levies are an opportunity, and technology is an opportunity to show the students that they want to be able to give them more opportunity. So when a levy is passed, it means that we want to give you an opportunity to be able to see bigger and better, especially for our students. There is a book written by Dr. Watkins it's called The Digital Edge. And it talks about how do you address inequality for Black and brown students in a world of digital inequity. One of the big pieces that it talks about is that districts that don't pass levies and that have a large proportion of students who are Black and brown usually have students who the opportunity gap continues to increase. And sometimes that's irregardless of whatever instructional model that they have in place. Belief. Levies passing is also a testament to the belief of the fact that technology, in this case especially, does give opportunity. So I want to really come back to that a little bit later. And then future. This investment means that we see the investment in technology giving you additional opportunities in the future to be able to grow the community. There's lots of examples of students coming back to communities to be able to invest in ways that make sense. But when we give the community the opportunity to invest in the student's future, it ties the community more to the school district as well as more to the individual students. And showing that belief really is a shot in the arm to most students to say that my community believes in me, my district believes in me, and we can move forward. So really quickly, I'm going to talk about fiscal budgets and hit them at a high level. The numbers are in the slideshow, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So one thing that I want to point out is that every single school district in the state received a significant amount of funds that were emergency funds, like the ESSER fund and the Emergency Connectivity Fund. What those funds allowed each school district to do was stretch any levy funds that they had available, meaning that most of the levy funds in these spaces weren't necessarily spent right away if they had a levy, because you were able to use the ESSER funds or the ECF funds, which were earmarked for very specific technology gap closing opportunities. And the language was interesting because if you read the language closely, it basically means that they've always identified the lack of technology as a gap, which means that it was indicated by that was the first thing that was attempted to be closed using the money. So this gives us a lot of opportunities, again, to use these funds to be able to close the gaps. But what that also means is that the levy gets spent down a little bit slower. But at the same time, the initial investment in technology is usually large, and then there's a maintenance cost. So this allows us to be able to stretch the levy, to be able to do more things in the future, but also to be able to do bigger things in the future that are sustainable based on whatever we've learned from the initial implementation of technology. So we did several different projects as a part of this. Was laptops for educators, prepare educators as well as teachers, and for students, and then hotspots in order to close the connectivity gap at the individual student level for students that need it. Then as part of the Emergency Connectivity Fund, we also were able to buy 1,000 iPads at the lower grade levels, and then 450 additional laptops to be able to get in that space. And that ECF round 3 is something that we're actually submitting currently to take advantage of the third filing for the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which will allow us to be able to stretch, again, the levy further if approved. So budgets, we co-create our budgets with our partners from business services as well as teaching and learning to figure what targets need to be taken for us to build technology and to support technology and instruction. So with those ESSER funds that I mentioned earlier, we spent on instructional tech as well as staffing to support the technology, because again, you can purchase the technology, but once the technology stops working or isn't used effectively, support is absolutely necessary and a necessary part of any technology program. In addition to these being the budget numbers for this year, there's also an additional $17 million in the budget plan for refreshes, applications, support staffing, and network infrastructure. Network infrastructure is important because it covers a lot of different things like hybrid work, remote access to documents, and those types of things that you need in order to do your work every day so that you can flex the work environment. And so for the 22-23 planning, I went into a little bit more detail about what next year's plan is going to be for those funds. And they're in a lot of the same spaces. So support applications, some services, additional staffing for the to support the levy and the number of devices that we have. Applications, network, ERP is our finance system, as well as the system that keeps track of staff and staffing. It's our golden staffing information system. And then some digitization, which allows us to be able to flex, again, work locations and such, because a lot of times our work is tied to physical media, and we want to be able to remove that and also archive over time based on state archiving laws. So some of the projects that we are working on currently. So we're really focused on student devices. I will mention a couple of different things about that, because earlier I made a distinction between purchasing one-to-one versus having a one-to-one program. There are 4 main components to a one-to-one program. That is distribution, swap, collection, and refresh. Distribution is mainly just the giving out of laptops to students who need it, right? But then there's a swap piece, which is I take a device and I give a device based on when it's broken so that there's less loss of instructional time. Then we have collection, which happens at the end of the year, depending on whether or not students are continuing, if there's any programs that continue over the summer, summer school, or whatever those cases might be. And then the refresh, which tends to be the biggest one in terms of dollar amount, because devices have a shelf life. Most Chromebooks are right there in that 4 to 5 year time frame. So every 4 to 5 years, you should be refreshing everything that you've purchased over a certain amount of time. So it's important for us to continue to purchase and continue to refresh so that we don't run into this same, or so we don't create a gap after another 2 or 3 years. The same thing with staff devices. There needs to be a refresh. Sometimes that's centrally orchestrated, but since we have the levy, we're able to supply those devices through the levy. I do need to mention the chip shortage. So I don't know if you've read any of the reports about the national global chip shortage that's impacting everything from food to cars to obviously technology devices. The challenge with that chip shortage and global logistics is the fact that the effects for that can be seen for potentially another 2 years, which at times makes the delay in purchasing and receiving very high. So we have to balance that against fiscal years, as well as when we put a PO and when receiving happens and those types of things. And considering the fact that we do most of the purchases in the April and May timeframe, and the lead time is about 8 to 12 weeks right now, it means that we might have to go through the process again. We're working with vendors as well as our value-added resellers to make sure that we're able to take advantage of it. But the chip shortage over the last couple of years prevented the total amount of devices that we're able to buy, but we're still able to supply for our students as we could. But as we continue refresh, that's a consideration for the future. So internet connections. This is one of the things I have a little bit of information on, but I'm sure that all of our students who need hotspots have them. We still have additional hotspots to be able to give out to students, and we will continue to take care of the needs of students as they have it. Just recently, some legislation was passed in order to continue subsidizing internet at the presidential level, as well as additional programs that have high-speed internet for $30 for families, and we're going to start to communicate that out more as time goes on. One of the things that we found with hotspots especially is that the bandwidth often isn't enough if there's multiple students in a house or depending on the platform that's being used. So we're also keeping those things into consideration. So network upgrades allows us internally to have increased bandwidth depending on how teaching has happened. If we have hybrid scenarios that are needed for work or for instruction, we need to make sure that we have the proper bandwidth in order to support that going both directions. So upgraded cybersecurity. K-12 cybersecurity is becoming one of the biggest hot button topics in discussion across districts because of a lot of recent high profile hacks that have happened. Student data is very valuable data because of the amount of time that you can use it if it is taken, right? And so I'll go deeper into cybersecurity in a future discussion, but it is high on our radar, and we're doing everything we can to put all the proper pieces in place, including additional staffing expertise and training programs for our users so that everyone knows what their role is in protecting our environment, protecting student data, and protecting their own data. A lot of the larger corporations are going in this direction with multi-factor authentication and other things that are absolutely crucial for anyone who has access to high-profile information. And we want to make sure that we have good data practices so that we're above board and able to make sure that we're protecting everyone's data, not just students, but every person who interacts in our district. And digital support and training. So there's funds established and projects for digital learning and also being able to take care of digital learning staffing. Media literacy is listed here just because we feel that this is tied into the entire framework of what we're trying to create, not just a standalone piece. And there's going to be more discussion about that again in the future as we do our planning. And so the last thing on this space is the upgrading classroom technology. So we're doing an installation of Promethean panels, which will touch every single classroom in the district. As part of that implementation, we're also including professional learning opportunities for the teachers so they can learn how to integrate the Promethean panels in their classrooms. As someone who just recently completed a Promethean installation of about 1,600 of these panels, the immediate impact is tremendous in the classroom for students to be able to use them, for teachers to be able to integrate and incorporate that into their instruction. And I'm hoping for the same thing here with partnership with our digital learning team and our tech integration team, excuse me. And also innovation. we have space to be able to create additional opportunities for improvement and efficiency in a lot of different places that I've found in the last few weeks. I'm sure I'll find more as we go. But this gives us an opportunity to innovate not only in the classroom, but also in central admin so that we can do more to support the people who serve students directly. So next steps and considerations. Here are a couple things that I want you to think about at the end of this in order to kind of wrap this up mentally and kind of leading to next steps. So sustainability is one big thing because we know that the ESSER funds and the ECF funds and all these emergency funds will dry up at some point. So when we have long-term levy programs that we've been able to stretch, we want to be able to sustain those programs over time. So sustainability is one of the key concerns that we have. Additionally, there are some programs that take at least a year or two to take in terms of becoming effective. So imagine having 2 years of funding for a program that takes 2 years and then the funding go away right when it starts to become good. It's something that we need to think about, right? Not in an alarmist kind of way, just this is the reality of funding for technology programs. Rich partnerships. We need to be able to sustain and grow rich partnerships, not only internally with the teams that we work with, but also with our community so they can have a different level of voice in some of the things that we do from a technology standpoint. I've talked to the team already about what that looks like in a couple of different ways, but we also have some recommendations on how we can create that and some models regionally of some school districts that have done this well. So pretty confident that we can get that done. And also innovation, again, we want to be able to have sustainable innovation that allows us to be able to do pilots and proof of concepts in ways that let us get in front of the long-term expenditure, meaning that we have to sometimes spend a little bit of money to make sure that we can save a lot of money by doing the right thing over the long term. So we need to be able to include innovation as part of our budgets over the long-term period. And then return on investment. So we need to be able to measure the positive impacts of the expenditures that we make for technology, which means that we need to have some success metrics so that we can determine we did this thing and this thing happened positively, or we did this thing happened negatively. And we need to be able to communicate that amongst ourselves as well as communicate that to the people who have trusted us to be able to move this forward. So with that said, I did not include a question slide. Not intentionally, not like I don't want to answer questions, but I'm more than willing to do a question and response, meaning that I'll respond, I might not have an answer. So that's it.
Thank you. Joe, you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Tashawn. Yeah, I have a couple of questions and a couple comments here. Around your opportunity slide where you had belief, future, the community slide where you had opportunity, belief, and future. Realistically, it is what I also would like to share with you is trust from our community, trust from our voters that entrusted us with the vote to say, you know what, we're going to be the best stewards of the dollars. So when we talk about return on investment, when we share that with these key stakeholders, we need to make sure that our community is advised of what we're doing with those dollars and how those are benefiting them as well as the students. So great on that. With the amount of technology we have out there, I saw that support staffing for 22-23 is a little bit over $1 million for the your budget there. How are we going to sustain that portion of it? With our students, not only but our teachers, but our students, making sure that they have the support. Like at 8, 9 o'clock at night where their computer shuts down or something to that effect.
So I appreciate that, the questions, Director Van. Let me speak to the first slide that I have up first. You mentioned the 3. I was treating belief as trust because personally I feel like you can't believe in something that you don't trust. So I was using the 2 terms interchangeably, but I get exactly what you're saying, and we'll make sure that we use those words intentionally, right? Because I understand exactly the impact of that word and what it would have on the community. So thank you. So to your second point, one of the things that we have been talking about is what are the tiers of support? So I strongly believe that if you create capacity across the system, technical capacity across the system, then you can do more sophisticated things. Meaning, how do we apply training at all levels so that we can do some of the basic things and get those taken care of? So if we apply that to students, how do we apply some, I call it tier 0 self-service type of support to be able to take care of some of the low-hanging fruit quickly, but things that are a little bit more severe, we have people who are available to be able to do that. So I have been thinking about what does it look like to sustain staff and staffing based on how many devices that we have out, based on what we're doing now, and based on what I would like to do in the future, based on some of the conversations that we've had. And that's part of a larger discussion that I need to talk about with, with teaching learning partners, budget partners, as well as what does that look like for technology? Because again, if we're just thinking about hardware, then that's one model. But if we want to start to expand in terms of what do we create ourselves and support ourselves and how do we sustain additional programs, we need to talk about making sure that we have the right roles in those positions and spaces.
Thank you.
Director Al?
Yeah. One of the things that you said that really stood out to me is that one-to-one access to technology does not equal equity. And I really appreciate that you're thinking about access. Yeah. So what are some of the barriers that we're facing right now? Kids have the one-to-one, but we don't yet have equity in terms of digital literacy or whatever it is. I'm just curious about that.
So one of the things that, and I appreciate the question, Director Howell, one of the things that we could continue to focus on, because I know that there's work already in this space, but we will need to grow it, is this idea of what does technology integration look like across your entire system? How do you build that additional capacity so that you have more people who are able to sit with teachers and say, all right, so this is how you use this tool in your space, right? As one teacher to another. This is how I've been able to use it in my space previously. But now I'm in a role to where I can coach and advise. In a previous role, we had digital learning coaches who were able to support that work, right? They knew the technology at a very deep level. They had their the pedagogy as well as their whole instructional practice, and were able to blend those, but also create relationships at the individual teacher level in order to make that happen. So again, some of that work is happening. It's just expanding that will give us additional opportunities and being able to do it with fidelity in more places. Because right now, the staff is small enough to where it's hard for them to reach everyone in a way that honors the fact that technology changes so quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely see so much potential. I admittedly am a bit of a Luddite, or was a bit of a Luddite. And I had a teacher who taught right next door to me, and he's like, try Google Classroom. And I was like, no. My kids print out their essays and hand them in to me, and that's, and it really radically changed how I was able to interact with students in terms of their writing. And I became like one of the biggest salespeople for like, use Google Classroom. It's really great. So giving teachers the time and the space to talk to one another about the ways that they can use tech. And I know I've been talking with Rebecca quite a bit about like our student information system. And if we want to really expand that to uploading student work and portfolios and things like that, I think about, gosh, we're going to have a lot of space, digital space to store that. But what a powerful tool for me as an 11th grade teacher to open up a student information system and not only see my students' test scores, but examples of their work and reflections and things like that. So,
yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the idea that you're pushing on, and I kind of tried to touch it on this slide, is the fact that technology isn't just a thing. Sometimes it's an idea. All right, because think about all the things that have been called technology, right? Being able to, boats that go faster, or whatever the case might be. So sometimes it's an idea, and it's growing what that idea is, and it's exactly what you described. Like, how do we create this space to say that, the thing that you're doing right now takes you 8 hours. This other thing takes you 2. It probably take you 6 hours of training, but still the return on investment is that saves 6 hours over the course of weeks and months and years. So innovation.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think my question is kind of similar to Director Howe, which was, what are ways that we're helping or incorporating opportunities to help with onboarding our staff with these new technologies? So it really is just, is there a way that we can make sure our HR partners are really helping us get all the new people into our org ready to start using a lot of this new technology? So just curiosities around that. And I think another question is related around staff and student wellness. Now that we are like creeping into this new area where technology is accessible all the time, how are we helping people realize that even though you're connected all the time, you don't need to be connected all the time, and helping people establish, that kind of space to make sure that they're not 24/7 working or on the grind. So those were like two kind of thoughts that I was having throughout this.
So I appreciate the questions, Director Garcia. I'll speak to the first one first, and then kind of jump into the next space, because the question that you asked about onboarding, it's funny. I was asked when I started a job many years ago if there was one project, what would be that project that I would work on personally as a technology person, and I said it would be onboarding, which seemed like it was totally unrelated. The reason being is because I feel like onboarding is one of the keys to retention. And I consider myself a high achiever, right? I'll own it. I do. I consider myself a high achiever, and I want to work with other high achievers. So my expectation is that a high achiever is not going to want to be able to walk into a space where they're not taught how to use the tools, not brought into a space where they can gain some level of comfort so that they can be successful. So to your point, it's something that's always on my mind, is how do we create that capacity early? But part of it is this idea of innovation. Is that part of the culture? Is that an expectation for staff? And then how do we communicate that expectation and partner on building that? So I have some ideas about that, and I'm going to talk to the partners about some possible ways to do that, because I have, again, some ideas. But part of it is understanding what it is we want to train people on, which means that we have to have, standard systems and things like that, which are things that I'm working on. Yes.
How Tashawn and I roll. We are just supporting one another in the moment. I just want to add too that truly this is a cross-departmental effort when we talk about onboarding, the use of technology, and then supporting staff. So examples of that are our summer induction process, where HR takes the lead on planning the onboarding for our new team. We take the lead from our technology services staff on the type of learning that teachers need, and then Megan Terwilliger and team are really supporting that instruction through professional learning for new teachers this summer. I'll also name that Megan also supports an ongoing personalized learning cohort, in which that's the ongoing support. So each building has an individual who is learning around new technology, new platforms, the Promethean boards, for instance, and we'll be able to bring that information back to staff so that we've got one skilled and trained member in each building and a go-to for teachers and that staff. So just wanted to jump in and provide those as a couple of examples of current work, and absolutely more to come now that we got Tashawn here.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So to answer the second question, you asked about staff and student wellness. I feel like we talk about digital media literacy, but there's a component of digital literacy and understanding of being what a digital culture, what that means, because it still feels new to people. And that's the reason why you get absorbed into this always on kind of space. So how do we create a digital culture within a culture to be able to explain things like, you can use the tools to tell you when to stop, right? There's something in Teams that you can set up to basically tell you, hey, it's the end of your day. Maybe you should wind down, right? I actually use that. It asks you, how are you doing today? You click the little button, say, I'm doing. It gives you a little 5-minute mindfulness kind of space, and it allows you to be able to create. But part of it is awareness of the tools that exist, that those tools exist. But the second part is really discussing the fact that you should use these tools. And that becomes part of your digital culture. So one of the things I really want to be able to partner on is, how do we create, a digital culture? Is that important to us? And then if it is, then we can start to really push these things across not just staff, but students, because these same tools are available to students as well.
Awesome. Thank you. One more question I think I also have is just around as we grow around having access to all these different types of technology, there's also questions that always get brought up around student privacy. Just would you be willing to share a little bit more about your personal philosophy around that, and how are we like making sure that our young people are safe, but also making sure that we're honoring and respecting their privacy?
So I'll speak briefly to this because this is one of those ones to where you have to understand culture and space. But my personal philosophy is that students, when they feel safe, they're able to kind of fully express, right? Fully express themselves, be able to step into spaces and be as authentic as possible. When we talk about from a data perspective, we want to be able to protect them as much as possible so that they can do what needs to be done. But there are circumstances to where, right, we start to cross some lines. So it's hard for me to speak without like a specific case, because sometimes it's a case by case thing. We want to be able to take care of and honor students, but we also want to make sure that we keep them safe. So I would love to talk about that more in the future, but I don't know if I can give you a good answer right now.
Can I build on that? Tashawn, could you talk maybe about, and maybe Katie might have some thoughts too, on what are the ways that we work to protect our student privacy from a data standpoint? I think that is also part of the question. Like, are there specific things we're doing to protect our students' data privacy?
So I'm going to ask, because there's a couple different ways to describe that. Some of it, the data privacy are things like chats protected, right? Or things like how do those things work? So not having enough familiarity, again, with our environment, kind of digging into it. I would love to be able to speak to that more, especially more thoroughly in the future. But right now, we treat data privacy in general as a priority because we understand that there's a certain amount of risk associated with exposure. And we want to make sure that we honor that risk at each individual student level as well, again, with our staff.
Sweet. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. We got a whole 15 minutes left, I think, before our next speaker. So
Excellent.
we'll recess for the rest of today. But thank you. Really appreciate it. We'll follow up if we have any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tashawn.
All right. We are reconvening. So thank you, everyone. Welcome back. We are now going to start our interviews for the prospective District 5 candidates. So I just want to remind folks, we are going to have an online survey available. We welcome and want the feedback from the community. And let's get this party started. So let's do just quick introductions on our side. So my name is Aron Garcia, president of the board, and I represent District 1, which is Burien, White Center, or Southern Burien and White Center. Director Van.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Van, the vice president of the school board. I represent District 3. That covers a little bit of Tukwila, SeaTac, a little bit of Burien.
I'm Carrie Howell, and I represent District 4, which is SeaTac west to Normandy Park.
We want to thank you so much for being here. So would you like to introduce yourself? Our team
How
will
about
help.
this?
Oh, there we go.
We got it. Okay. Awesome. Okay, yes. So my name is Azeb Hagos, and I'm a parent of a kid that is in kindergarten, foster parented, a kid who's now in high school. Both of them are in the Highline Public Schools, and a little bit of who I am and my name.
Thank you. We're going to start you off with the hot seat question of, please tell us why you're interested in being a Highline District 5 director and how you are uniquely prepared for this role.
Sorry, can you give me that again? Because there's two parts to that question.
Please tell us how you are, or why you're interested in being a Highline District 5 director and how you are uniquely prepared for this role.
Okay. Why am I interested? You know, these past couple of years have been such a big change to everything that I've ever known. I've worked in education for a decade. So going from what I knew to where we were at through the pandemic, and coming into it as a parent of a kid who had just started as the pandemic hit. He just started his learning in preschool when the pandemic hit. It changed everything for me and my family. So every opportunity, you know, they say when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And every opportunity I found to participate as a parent, not as an educator, but as a parent in the Highline School District, I took. When I heard there was the PTA had, there was a possibility of the PTA no longer being able to serve the community, I took a position on the PTA to save it. So our families had an opportunity to have a voice, and our kids had opportunities to receive these enrichment programs that the PTA serves. From there, I heard about there was a care team that was put together by the district to talk about and work through how to fund and use fundings to support kids now at this time through the pandemic. I volunteered for that as well, and I participated and I lend my voice to that work. And then when there was a search for our new superintendent, I participated in every single way through the surveys, and I went on to join a forum, which I was caught off guard. I was the only parent there, but I participated in the forum to shape and lend to the vision of our leadership coming into what we all know education to be now. So through all of those things, I recognized that I am very much invested in what happens in the Highline Public Schools. I do want to lend my voice to the vision and to the future of the work that comes into it with our schools. I will be a parent of a student in Highline Public Schools for the next 15 years. I have a kid who's going into preschool next year. I'm in this for the long haul. It is very important to me that we continue to build on what's been done over the years and use what we now know coming out of a pandemic to support all children in their educational success. So that's why I'm interested in being a part of this work. How am I uniquely shaped? I think I kind of mentioned a little bit of both ends. I am an educator. I've done this work for a decade, I also have done work in the community across the years. When families needed support with navigating and understanding school systems, I volunteered on teams that were providing presentations to families so that they knew how to navigate educational systems to help their kids succeed. I supported the nonprofit programs around our communities and championed their work so that they can partner with our schools. And I've done a lot of work on top of my role, as I am a school counselor, by the way. On top of my role as a school counselor, I've done a lot of committee work to support creating, implementing, and then presenting work to support our district efforts. So we implemented quite a few programs that are still in place now.
Thank you, Director Mann.
All right. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is a two-part question. As a board director, what are your expectations of student learning? Is our current strategy working? If not, what are your recommendations to help us improve?
Okay. Forgive me, I'm not a public speaker just yet. So you might have heard a lot of ums in the previous response to the question. I'm working on that, and that's something that I'll grow in. But let's see. So as far as a board director expectations, I know the work takes creating and working together to have vision, to create structure, to make sure there's accountability on the work that we're doing on behalf of our kids, and to ensure that there is equitable access to success. I'm new to the Highline Public Schools, so I don't have all the information as to what you have been doing. But I do know what I saw in the buildings and how hard our teachers worked to match the vision that you have created as a district. My recommendation is to build on that success that I've seen so far, what I consider success. I believe that, well, I should say, looking at and knowing that you are very much interested in hearing from families, from students, gathering those surveys, making sure that there is data, making sure that there is, the most current information being pulled together to create an educational system that benefits all. I think that should be what we focus on as we move forward together.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, nice to meet you. All right, unfortunately, mine is the longest question. One of the outlined functions of the board is accountability to student learning. This is explained as adopting a system of continuous assessment of all conditions affecting education, including assessments for measuring staff and student progress towards goals. If you were to become a board director, what measurements and data would you prioritize in measuring staff and student progress? And what skills would you bring to this process?
You mind sharing it one more time just to make sure I caught it?
Here we go. Is this a joke? I feel like you're punking me. One of the outlined functions of the board is accountability to student learning. This is explained as adopting a system of continuous assessment of all conditions affecting education, including assessments for measuring staff and student progress towards goals. If you were to become a board director, what measurements and data would you prioritize in measuring staff and student progress? And what skills would you bring to this process?
Okay. Knowing that there are a variety of pieces of data that's already being used, I think it's important that we utilize what we have. There is such rich information in all of the data that I believe, well, that I've seen other school districts, and I know that Highline School Districts is using, utilizing that and really digesting that information, I think is critical. That information can be disaggregated typically in a multitude of different ways, and I think adding to something without having known if we are using and utilizing what we already have would be a disservice to our everyone, families, teachers, and kids. When I look at what I've been asked to produce as a parent in terms of providing feedback, I know there's a wealth of information that is asked, a great compiling of data systems to share, to indicate what are the priorities as far as what parent voices is being provided. And so knowing that piece of information, I think the first piece would be to pay good attention to what we're already using and making sure we're disaggregating it well, so that we're feeding, we're learning and being able to feed the information we're looking for. So definitely academic data is important. I think, obviously, that's what we do. Well, that's what school systems do. I also know that SEL data, social emotional data, is critical to gather if our kids are feeling safe and comfortable at school. Without that, kids can't learn unless they're feeling safe and comfortable in their classrooms. So no matter how much learning is being done, if they are not feeling safe enough to make a mistake, to feel, feeling safe enough to show emotional, any type of emotional insecurity, to feel safe enough with their peers, that their peers would be lifting them up. Without that, kids are just not ready to learn. So I believe social emotional data would be the area that I have top skills in. I've been a part of compiling, been a part of creating questions, have been a part of researching and identifying district-wide systems that we can plug into our schools, and have been a part of implementation. I think that's a part that I can add to this team.
Thank you.
So this next question is kind of focused around themes of responsible governance and community engagement. The question is, how will you center students, families, and community stakeholders in your decision-making process?
You said families and?
Students, families, and community stakeholders in your decision-making process.
I think the community part might be one that I can see is lacking. I know that we have definitely have some families and student feedback processes which can be improved upon, but I don't see a lot of connection with the City of Des Moines in terms of being able to gather community feedback on school progresses and things like that. So centering and partnering with those who work in the community, in the city, to understand what are we looking for our kids in our community and how can we make that happen. I think that's a piece that I would be able to add to this team.
All right, so one last question that I would like to give you about a minute or so. This is your elevator speech, right? Please let us and the community know why you should be appointed to this position.
So I entered into the career that I have now by way of life experiences. My father was one who did not know how to advocate or support his kids. We had a family of 10 people in our family, 10 kids in our family, and he really didn't have an idea of how to go about doing it, but he knew he wanted to see us succeed. And so he would go into the schools and, just be as loud as he can be in all kinds of languages, Arabic and Amharinya and Tigrinya, just anything he can do in English. He would just jumble it all up and just spew it all out. And because of that, it was very hard for folks to hear his message because the tone and the demeanor of it all was just not what was expected to be a collaborative approach. And so through that, I just happened to become one of the kids in the family to help support my mom and my dad and making sure that we had all the opportunities for success in school. And, I became the interpreter, I became the translator, I became everything. One of my sisters were being evaluated for special education services, which threw my whole family into a loop. And so that started at the age of 13. It wasn't a choice, it was a need. It was a need, it was big. That same sister of mine who was evaluated for special education services with some guidance and support from me and our family is now in her graduate program for occupational therapy. I know how to make things work for success for kids. I've done it since the age of 13. It has been ingrained in me. It is a part of my bloodline to go out and make sure that when there are things that are wrong or misunderstood, to look for some solutions, provide ideas, bring a vision, and make it work. I've done it for my own siblings. I've done it for the people around me in my own neighborhoods. I've done it for the kids and community across thousands of children over the years. I am uniquely positioned. I believe the skill set that I will bring, minus the need for improved my public speaking, is invaluable to this team, and I'm going to be here for a very long time. We are not going anywhere. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just so you know, next week at our board meeting, we'll be entering executive session where we'll hotly debate this and go back and forth, but we'll be making an announcement next week on our selection. And we welcome feedback. So if there's anything that you forgot, you wanted to mention, I know I always do this, but we have a whole week, so feel free to reach out to all of us. And I know that Director Alvarez will be joining us online and watching your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and your
Appreciate it.
consideration.
Thank you.
All right, our next one starts at 6 o'clock, so we'll recess until 6 p.m. let's get this show started. Is our next speaker here? I'm gonna go out there. All right. Well, we will continue in our recess until our next speaker presents, or until 6:30.
Aaron, you're wanted in the principal's office.
Director Howell is correct.
Just a reminder for anybody who's watching us online that we are in recess until 6:30 for our next presenter.
So this is you. Feel free to adjust this if you want to adjust it a little bit. And Director Garcia, who's our board president, will start us off. Good. Take a minute and get yourself comfortable.
All right. So we're going to speed things up a little bit. We have our next presenter who arrived a little bit early, so we're going to get the ball rolling. So before we begin, we're actually going to quickly introduce ourselves and then give you a chance to introduce yourself. My name is Aron Garcia. I represent District 1, so that's a little bit of White Center, Northern Burien, and that's most of my district. Director Van.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming this evening. My name is Joe Van, Vice President of the School Board. I am part of District 3 that covers a little bit of Tukwila, Northern Burien, a little bit of Burien here, and SeaTac.
Hi, I'm Carrie Howell, and I represent District 4, which is just south of Joe, from SeaTac all the way west to Normandy Park. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
And welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself to start off.
So, good evening, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Hamdi Abdulle. I live in Des Moines, 2100 Pacific, D209, and I am the Director of African Community Housing and Development, an organization that is located in SeaTac. I'm a former teacher back home in Somalia. I've worked with different children with different ages when I arrived here in the United States, in Virginia. I started working with early learning, childhood, preschool, as well as daycare center, understanding and figuring out what early childhood education looks like in the United States in 1995. And starting from there, I graduated from George Mason University as a science teacher. Also had worked in the health system. In those days, as a mother of 5 who raised 5 children, I have no opportunity but to work sometimes 2 jobs or 3 jobs as necessary and go to school and graduate. I've moved to Seattle to the west because one of my children at that time was looking for a job after graduating with me at George Mason together. And we moved to here after him because my daughters didn't want to stay without their brother, and you know how teenagers want to move far away from the parents. And at their high school, some of them attended here and Bellevue as well as UW. Later on graduated as one of them law school from two of my kids are in the technology, and others are working in the services because we are family of givers and service providers. I have a resume that probably I would love to give 1 page, 2 sides to give you later on, but I was very much, because of my background being education and my heart going to education, I ended up coming to Seattle and in area called Skyway area, where we had so many children, refugee children that were struggling in 2005. I've started my research and work with the community, not knowing anybody, But at the same time, I decided to navigate the systems that really are hard to navigate most of the time, especially when you have no connection. I've benefited from advices and support from community members and members of the social services, members of the education service, members of different sectors, including school districts, learned from them, so understood the disproportionality in our education as well as in our health system, as well as in every aspect of life for a needy community that's absolutely poverty affects them disproportionately. And I thought that there is a solution, and the solution is to do our part of the work and work as hard as we can, double and triple our work, and at the same time engage the community, the parents, the elders, and the youth. My organization serves our community. I could say, like, during COVID, we have provided almost 38 million to support eviction prevention to the community with the programs that came through King County. I have worked with eviction in multiple ways, especially with many families that work, that are housed by the housing systems like Seattle Housing or King County Housing with Section 8 programs. I support youth with education. I train parents with trainings that they need to make sure that their children thrive. I believe in informed community, and when I'm saying informed at all levels, whether they are school district, whether it's health systems, whether it's the county, and whether it's Governor Inslee and anybody that has that level. I'm a fearless advocate for social justice. I've won awards to do that. I've made relationships with schools like Highline School District. I'm passionate of working with Highline School Board as well as school staff. I have great friends in that system. I feel that the informed community, meaning like information that is not only one way but both ways. I believe in educating our education system around culture. I also believe transparency. I believe equity, equitable support services that all our children deserve. I believe I see things from multiple angles and analyze because I'm just, my background is science, and you can understand that. I don't see this paper as a paper. I see it, what's the shape, what's inside, so many things behind. So people call me, you're very analytical, and sometimes puts me in trouble because I get into questions that sometimes hard to answer. I believe also that the connection between elected officials and the community that elects them. I like to introduce my ideas from the service side to the school district. I cannot finish everything that I need to finish, but do you want me to continue, or should I stop?
Definitely. So we actually have a couple questions. Sorry, I should have led with that one. The first question, you've already answered it in a lot of ways, but I want to give you a chance to make sure there wasn't something you didn't get a chance to cover. Mm-hmm. The first question is just tell us a little bit about tell us why you're interested in being a Highline District 5 director, and why are you uniquely prepared for this position?
I am not saying I'm uniquely prepared, but I could say I'm prepared because I don't know how many better people ahead of me or behind me, and I respect that. I am someone who believes in consensus and the ideas that the collective believe and the choices that you may have later on. But I'm interested because I believe that I have something to contribute if I have the chance, something to share with the board, something that I always wanted. Like, if I am in that position, I would do this, or I would share that. And saying that, I thought that this is probably an opportunity, because I didn't want to go for election and stuff like that. I'm gonna be clear about that. But if there is an opportunity where I can bridge the gap while I am able to, I thought that this was this opportunity. And I feel that at that level of the board, our voice is missing. The refugee community, which probably is always behind, but I want to also share that Einstein was a refugee. You know what he has contributed? We all know that. So I thought, like, what could, through my age, my experience, my learning, my time, my love and my passion, what could I contribute at this time? And I would appreciate if I would be chosen, but if not, then I think that there will be always somebody who's better than me. So that's the reason that I thought, like, I need to join this time. And also learn from you all, from those who are in that seat. Because it's not only my contribution, but it's a mutual, two-way contribution. We all learn from each other. I'm a believer of learning community. I'm a member of that, and I appreciate the fact that there is such thing like we belong to the learning community rather than we belong to this or to that. Yeah.
Thank you. Director Van?
Thank you. So this is a two-part question. As a board director, what are your expectations of student learning? And is our current strategy working? If not, what are your recommendations to help us improve?
So I am going to be honest with you. I did not read the current strategy in a deep way or spend much time, but I believe that at the position that the board is at this time, or the executive at the executive level, that position that we are right now in, there is always room for improvement. I believe that sometimes the community needs to see the board walking down the community and visiting what's happening in the community, which is something that I've never experienced, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I wanna see a more deep equity in student learning. I would say, like, if a teacher comes to the class, should know what is equitable learning or equitable teaching, and how could a teacher has both the intention and the attention to make sure that whatever he is conveying or she is conveying is being heard, understood, and that teacher is able to see the outcome of what they have given. So it's like introducing the real definition of teaching, which is, what measurement you have that makes you feel that you're a good teacher, or you're doing the teacher. But at the same time, I don't believe in pressure. I feel that our teachers are being pressured a lot. I feel that our directors are being pressured a lot. But I don't want a school system that operates under unnecessary pressure sometimes. But we want, with pressure, we cannot nurture a child. If you spend 1 hour with a child or 10 minutes with a child, there are 10 minutes that a million times are better than 10 hours. And it depends upon how comfortable that teacher is, that he's or she is doing her job and making sure that her work or his work is impacting the child's learning.
Okay, thank you.
All right. One of the outlined functions of the board is accountability to student learning. This is explained as adopting a system of continuous assessment of all conditions affecting education, including assessments for measuring staff and student progress towards goals. If you were to become a board director, what measurements and data would you prioritize in measuring staff and student progress, and what skills would you bring to this process?
Great question. I would say that while we cannot have an impact that we are 100% sure that it will work and it will be effective, I believe in having a measurement that touches every child and every student, not some of the students. If you see in those systems, you will see that we don't have, like if I want specifically to see an ethnic minority group, how they are doing, I don't have the data that tells me how they are doing in the systems. So I would, encourage a data collection that definitely speaks to every child's improvement and learning, and continuously analyzing if child A is point A today, what being point B in point B or more looks like. So a continuous analyzing, I think, is great. Also, reporting at a time that we can do something about child's learning, especially speaking for the parents. Like I would want parent engagement to be a critical factor to child progress, because they are the closest ones that have to put also their half of the work to make sure that their child is progressing, and that can happen only when there is happiness and harmony and collaboration between the school, the teachers and the school system, and the reception, including where families come, and parent engagement department as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is around responsible governance and community engagement. How will you center students, families, and community stakeholders in your decision-making process?
Well, I have to be informed first before I do that. If I am informed and following up with, every step of the way, what is happening, and reading and learning and being in the community, then I can respond to that. But I don't believe that when I sitting on the bench is effective or works the best.
Thank you. Director Van?
All right, this is going to be the last question here. I'm going to give you an opportunity, about a minute, to share with the community and with us why, if you were to be appointed, why would you want to be appointed as a school board director?
Say again, please.
I'm going to give you about a minute to share with us and share with the community why would you like to be a school board director. It's very similar to the very first question, but now you get to really sell yourself and share with the community.
I like to be a school board director because, first of all, it's an honor and it's a prestige. And it's an honor that goes with responsibility. And I want to be fulfilling that responsibility along with you I believe in consensus in decision making, but at the same time, I believe in having my voice and everybody's voice heard, and we become more analytical to the subject at hand at any given time. I think that's why.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So just a couple of reminders for folks who are viewing in that there is a survey that folks can share with us so that we can hear your feedback on what you think on the candidates. We'll be making our decision next week at our board meeting. We'll enter into executive session and we'll reach out to the finalists. And within the week, if there's just something that you forgot that you wanted to mention or share with us, feel free to reach out to us, reach out to all the board members, and we're always open to hear anything that you have left to say. So thank you for coming here tonight.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. We do have our next presenter here. Do you guys want a minute or two, or? Cool. Well, so we'll recess for about another 2 minutes, and we'll jump back for our final presenter.
Thank you. Perfect. All right, let's get her going here.
All right, Holly, we are ready to go.
We're ready to go.
Thank you, Holly.
Thanks.
All right. We're going to start off, just do some quick introductions on our end, and then we'll hand it off for you to do a quick intro, and we'll start fielding some questions. So my name is Aron Garcia. I represent District 1, so that's White Center, and a little bit of Northern Burien.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Van. I am for District Number 3, a little bit of SeaTac, Burien, and Northern Burien, and a little bit of Tukwila.
I'm Carrie Howell, and I represent District 4, which is SeaTac, west to Normandy Park.
Great.
And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Like a long intro, short intro?
You can make it short. That way it doesn't feed into our questions.
Sure. My name is Chad Harper. I am currently a librarian in the Highline School District. So I'm an educator and community leader volunteer. Previously been involved with the Highline Schools Foundation as a trustee. Co-led the successful 2016 bond effort and a subsequent successful levy. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and hopefully continue my work in the community and as an educator and someone who's passionate about equity and education here on the school board.
Thank you, Chad. I'll lead off with the first icebreaker question. Just tell us a little bit more about why you're interested in being the Highline District 5 director, and how are you uniquely prepared for this role?
Yeah. So to talk a little bit more about my background and who I am, I was raised by my grandmother entirely on her own. We were very low income. We were about as low income as someone could possibly be without experiencing homelessness. So we didn't have much, but what we did have was really great public schools, and that combined with her pretty fierce determination that I do well in school and get an education to have the best future possible, enabled me to be the first person in my family to graduate high school, go to college, and earn a master's degree in teaching, a subject I'm very passionate about. And so I know very, very well the personal impact that good public schools and the impact that those can have on students and can set the trajectory for pretty much the rest of their life. So when I moved to this area about 10 years ago and we had school bonds that were not passing, I rolled up my sleeves and joined with a bunch of other stakeholders and educators and community members to help put a package together that could pass. Fortunately, it was the one bright spot of the 2016 election night that we passed our school bond, so teachers didn't have to teach in hallways and closets anymore. Because I'm a resident of Des Moines, I kind of made it my personal mission to make sure that we had a new elementary school that met the needs of our educators and students in the city that I live in. And it's kind of one of the things I'm most proud of. And continued to stay involved with other levy campaigns, with the Schools Foundation. And so this just seemed like one other opportunity to continue the work that I've been doing as an educator, as someone who's passionate about equity and education, and someone who's been really connected and involved in the community.
Good afternoon. So as a board director, what would your expectations for student learning be? Is our current strategy working? If not, what are your recommendations to help us improve?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. As a board director, what would your expectations for student learning be? Is our current strategy working? And if they're not working, what are your recommendations to help us improve?
Yeah. I certainly don't expect everything to be solved overnight. I think first and foremost, we should be guided by the district's mission that we know every student by name, strength, and need, and that they're prepared for the future that they choose. I would expect that we should be seeing growth. Students should we should be seeing an increase in students who are meeting standard. As far as is what we're doing working, I think the Highline School District has very strong convictions about equity and has made racial equity a pretty central piece of its agenda, for lack of a better word. The area that I think we could maybe focus on a little more. I'm a librarian, and so one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about is digital learning and tech equity as well, and it's part of the Highline School's strategic plan for digital media and digital media literacy. I think there are some improvements we can make. I think digital learning is kind of one of the next horizons in terms of equity in education. I've seen that firsthand as a teacher librarian in an elementary and a middle school. The Highline School District has made it a point to require, and I think it was 9th and 11th grade, to have some digital citizenship being taught. I would like to explore ways to expand that in secondary schools. In elementary schools, it's a lot easier because everyone's class comes to the library once a week for a certain amount of time. But in secondary schools, and I've experienced that firsthand this year, it's not as much of a guarantee. And so I think if we're going to prepare students for the future that they need per our mission and values, that needs to be a lot more of a consistent thing from grades 6 through 12.
Thank you, Chad.
All right. One of the outlined functions of the board is accountability to student learning. This is explained as adopting a system of continuous assessment of all conditions affecting education, including assessments for measuring staff and student progress towards goals. If you were to become a board director, what measurements and data would you prioritize in measuring staff and student progress, and what skills would you bring to this process?
I would approach this like an educator when it comes to evaluating staff. I would see kind of staff as our students in a way. As an educator, we for every lesson, we set a learning target and a success criteria to let ourselves and students know if they've met it or not, and then we assess throughout the lesson, and then at the end if they've met it or not. And I'd bring the same approach to assessing staff. What was the objective? How were we going to measure that objective or measure that goal? Did they meet it? If not, what kind of support do they need? And then come up with some sort of concrete steps for how to get to where they need to go. And if they did meet the objective, talk about next steps. There's always something that can be done. Always something more.
Thank you.
I want to add some real quick. I think, like I said earlier, I don't expect anything to be solved overnight, and I certainly don't believe in writing anyone off because like they didn't meet an objective, they didn't meet a goal that the district had set. I think in those cases, examining, like I said, systems and targeted support and some readjustment and maybe some rethinking of strategy, not necessarily like laying blame, like this person didn't do well, so they gotta go. So that's all.
Thanks.
This next question is around themes around community engagement and responsible governance. How will you center students, families, community stakeholders in your decision-making process?
I absolutely believe that students come first. They are number one. They are the entire reason why we are here. In any decision that the board would make, I would see it as part of my role to kind of do what I've always done, to think about who does this decision affect the most and most directly, and come up with a plan to go talk to those people and say, here's the problem, we need to come up with a solution, and students absolutely need to be involved, parents need to be involved, labor groups need to be involved, everyone needs to be involved in the solution. I think as we've seen with not getting bonds passed, bringing people to the table so that we're all sharing the same information and we can all get on the same page, and so everyone knows that we all want the same thing, and we may have different ideas about how to get there, but that's what this public process is about, is for us to, this is going to sound super cheesy, but I am an educator. It's part of us coming together to solve a solution, and when that happens, you just have a lot more buy-in, even from people who come in skeptical. They leave feeling at least that they've been heard, and they may not ultimately 100% agree, but at least they get to feel like they've had meaningful input.
All right, appreciate that. So one last question here. This is your opportunity. I'm going to give you about a minute and a half for an elevator speech. Why should we appoint you as the next school board director?
Yeah. as I saw from the little bios from all of us, we've all had experience in some way, shape, or form with education. I think I bring the right mix of direct classroom and education experience combined with proven community leadership. Like I said before, this is just an extension of things that I've already been doing. I care deeply about Highline Public Schools. This is where I live. I don't have children of my own, but if I did, I would send them to this school district in a heartbeat. I've kind of made it my point to remain involved in these issues because of the personal impact schools have had on me. I served on as one of the teachers in the superintendent search where we hired Dr. Duran, and I'm not just saying this because he's here, but I was thrilled that that was the choice that the board made. In eyes of the teachers, that was the easy choice. So I think I bring the right combination of professional and lived in community experience. Also, I just want to take a second to talk about LGBTQ representation in our community and in the broader sphere of the world. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but LGBTQ people make up roughly, I think it's 10% of citizens or residents of the United States, and we make up somewhere under 1% of all people who hold public office, and I think that needs to change. We know that increased visibility and increased representation, especially for kids, helps them feel a sense of belonging and that they matter, and we all bring our own personal and professional experiences to this position or any other, and I wouldn't equate mine with anyone else's. I would be the first person to say that even though I'm LGBTQ, I've certainly felt like an outsider in life. I'd be the first person to raise my hand and say, as a white guy, I've certainly had it a lot easier than others. I have oodles and oodles of privilege, certainly, but I don't hesitate to go into white spaces and weaponize it on behalf of people who have also been excluded or marginalized in life. I just felt like someone from our community should put their name in the hat and step forward. I thought I brought the right experience, and I was just thinking about like the closeted teenage version of myself. I was thinking about all the kids in the Equality Club at Chinook Middle School, and I just thought it was time that someone with that perspective served on the school board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Just as a reminder for anybody who's tuning in, we're asking for community feedback. So if you want to fill out the survey, this is a great time to give us feedback on the candidates. You might know, but next week we'll be deciding on our final applicant. We'll be entering into executive session, and then we'll be coming out and making an announcement after that. And feel free, if there's something you missed out, I know that it's, whenever you're on the hot seat, you sometimes miss something. So you got a whole week to follow up with us if there's something you wanted to make sure you shared with us. So thank you, Chad.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. This now concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for everyone who came through and everyone who's watching us online.
Appreciate it.